So this is the review for your next test, quarter two, test number 1. So take a look at the first one. We have a polynomial. We're adding it to another polynomial. When we add polynomials, all you have to do is combine like terms. So look for like terms here. So I have a negative 11 over 4x squared plus 45 over 8x squared. So just put those fractions into your calculator. Negative 11 over 4 plus 45 over 8. So that's 23 over 8. Remember, we don't do anything with the variable, so it just stays r squared. All right, now next we have 4/3 r and negative 12 over 7r. So plug those in your calculator. And we'll get negative 8 over 21 r. Remember, don't do anything with the variable. Okay, and then next we have 4 over 3, 4/3, and we're adding it to 8/7. And you get 52, so plus 52 over 21. All right, so let's take a look at the next one, number 2. So number 2 says to factor. So I notice, factor and solve, I'm sorry, because it's an equation, right, because there's an equal sign. So it is a quadratic because it has a 2, so I'm going to first make this equal to 0 and then see where we go from there. All right, so I always want to keep my x squared, or in this case, my v squared, positive. And since the 4 is positive, I'm going to move all this stuff here on the right side over to the left side. So I'm going to add 3v to both sides and minus 10. So just put it in the right order. We have 4v squared plus 3v minus 10 equals 0. Okay, so now we're going to factor. So I'm looking for if there's a GCF. I don't see a GCF. And then I notice, okay, well, there's 3 terms, so it must be trinomial master product. So I multiply the first times the last. We get negative 40v squared. So we say to ourselves, what multiplies to 40 minuses to a 3. So that would be 8 and 5. So it would be 8v and 5v. So now when we multiply 8 times 5, it has to give me negative 40. So I have to have different signs. But when I add them together, it has to give me positive 3. So it has to be plus 8 and minus 5. Bring down the minus 10 and the 4v squared. Make sure it still equals 0. Now there's 4 terms, and we should know by now 4 terms means to factor by grouping. So in the blue group, which is my first group, the GCF is 4v times v plus 2. In my second group, the green group, I notice there is a minus there, so I bring down the minus. The GCF is then 5, and then I get v plus 2. All right, so then my factors are, remember, it's what's in front of the parentheses, 4v minus 5. And it's your double parentheses, v plus 2. Make sure it still equals 0. And then we make our t-chart. Set each one equal to 0. 4v minus 5 equals 0. v plus 2 equals 0. This one is add 5 to both sides. 4v equals 5. Divide by 4, we get a fraction. v equals 5/4. On the right, minus 2. v equals negative 2. Okay, so let's take a look at number 3. Okay, so again, number 3, this quadratic, I know it's quadratic because the n squared is not equal to 0, so I want to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to have to minus 6 over, so minus 6 to both sides. So I get n squared minus 5n minus 6. Remember, we can't actually combine them because they're not like terms. One has an n, one doesn't. All right, so now I'm going to factor. So first thing I always look for is GCF. I don't see a GCF. I see 3 terms. I'm going to mass the product. So I multiply the first times the last. I get negative 6n squared. So what multiplies to 6 minuses to a 5? That is 6 and 1. Multiply to 6 minus to 5. So we'll put an n and n in each one. There are going to be different signs. That's the only way to multiply 6 times 1 and get a negative 6. When we add them, we have to get negative 5. So it has to be negative 6 and a plus 1. Sorry, I have to just give myself more room. So it'll be negative 6n and a positive 1n. Bring down the n's. Now we're going to factor by grouping. So we have n times n minus 6. In the green parentheses, GCF, I see there's a 1 there, so it's going to be positive 1. So that's the largest number that goes into 1 and 6, so it'll be n minus 6. So my factors are n plus 1, because those are my coefficients. And then the n minus 6 equals 0. T-chart, set them equal to 0. And solve it. Minus 1, n equals negative 1. Add 6, n equals 6. Okay, so let's look at number 4. Okay, so number 4 says to solve the equation by completing the square. All right, so I have a squared plus 16a plus 61 equals 0. Remember, the first thing we're always checking is to make sure that I have a 1 in front and it's equal to 0. So it is equal to 0, which is good. And there is a 1 in front of the a squared, so that's good. All right, so then the next thing is we minus 61 over to the left side. So minus 61. So we have a squared plus 16a equals negative 61. All right, so now, remember we do half of b. So it's half of 16. Half of 16 is 8. And then we square it and we get 64. And then I take that number and I add it to the right side and over here into the left side. So we get a squared plus 16a plus 64 equals negative 61 plus 64. All right, now we're going to add the right side together. So we get 3 here. Equals. Now, this side here, we're going to factor. Now, remember, when we factor this, we get the same parentheses. It's always x and x. Now, hopefully, you remember, the number that goes inside here is always the number that we got when we did whatever number we squared. What number did we square? We squared a positive 8, so it's plus 8. Another way to write x plus 8 times x plus 8 is x plus 8 squared equals 3. Now, how do we get rid of a square? Well, we square root both sides. So we get x plus 8 equals, don't forget the plus minus in front of the square root of 3. And then we have to minus 8 so that we can solve for x. So we get, I'm just going to move this up a tiny bit. So 8's cancel. We get x equals, put the negative 8 in front of the plus minus, so it's negative 8 plus minus the square root of 3. Okay, let's take a look at number 5. Okay, so number 5 here, let me just get rid of this here. So number 5, we have a couple things going on. I noticed that it's not equal to 0, so I need it to equal 0 first. So we're going to minus 9 from both sides. That's the first thing, minus 9. Get it to equal 0. Notice I line it up with the negative 21 because they are like terms. So it's 10v squared minus 20v minus 30 equals 0. Now the next issue is that we have this 10 in front. You have to have a 1 in front. So you have to divide through by 10. Everything gets divided by 10. So we have v squared minus 2v minus 3 equals 0. All right, next, now we add the 3 back over. So we have v squared minus 2v equals 3. All right, now we're ready to complete the square. So remember, now we do half of the b value. Half of negative 2, watch the signs, is negative 1. Squared is positive 1. Add that to both sides, to that side and to that side. So we get v squared minus 2v plus 1 equals 3 plus 1. 3 plus 1 is 4. We're going to factor. Remember, we're going to get the same parentheses, so it's v and v. The number that goes inside, remember, is whatever we squared. What number did we square? Negative 1, so it's minus 1. That's why it's important to keep track of your signs. Okay, next. What's another way to write v minus 1 times v minus 1? V minus 1 squared equals 4. Square root both sides. So we get v minus 1 equals, don't forget plus minus, and the square root of 4 is 2. Add the 1 over, put the 1 in front of the plus minus. So it's 1 plus minus 2. Now we're not done because we can actually finish this. We have v equals 1 plus 2, which is 3. And v equals 1 minus 2, which is negative 1. All right, let's flip it over and do the next page. Okay, so we have to solve the system of equations by substitution. So remember, I told you guys to put them both in y equals form. The bottom one is in y equals form, so I have to take the top one and put this in y equals form so that I could set them equal to each other. All right, so I'm going to minus 2x from both sides. So I get 6y equals negative 2x minus 18. All right, it's still not in y equals form, so I have to divide by 6. Now, you will get a fraction here, but that's okay. So I get y equals negative 2/3, negative 2 over 6, is negative 1/3, so it's negative 1/3 x minus 3. All right, so now you're going to take your two equations, negative 4x minus 3, and equal them to each other. So remember, I've always said I like to move the smaller x first. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides. Use your fraction key on the calculator to add them. So it's negative 3 equals negative 1/3 plus 4 is 11/3. X minus 3. Now we're going to add 3 to both sides. So this is nice because both sides actually become 0. So I have 0 equals 11/3 x. Now get rid of the 11/3. Remember, the right way to get rid of a fraction is to multiply by its reciprocal. So this is nice because 0 times anything is equal to 0. So x is equal to 0. All right, now we have to find y. I'm going to use this equation right here because it's in y equals form. So y equals negative 4x minus 3. My x is equal to 0. So I have y equals 4 times 0 minus 3. Y equals 0 minus 3. Y is equal to negative 3. And so my solution is 0, negative 3. And of course, you guys know how to do checks if it says to check the solutions or to verify the solutions. Okay, next. Number 7. It says to solve each system of equation by elimination. That's when you want to cancel one out. All right, so take a look at 7. So this is nice. This is 4x, this is negative 8x. I can make the 4 and 8x by just multiplying by 2. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to multiply the top one by 2 here. Make sure you go all the way through. So I get 8x minus 20y equals negative 32. Keep the bottom equation the same, which is negative 8x plus 5y equals negative 28. Okay, now add them together. The negative 8x and positive 8x cancel. Negative 20y plus 5y is negative 15y equals. And negative 32 minus 28 is negative 60. divide by negative 15. Y is equal to positive 4. All right, so now we have to find x. Right, and what do we know? Y is equal to positive 4. So it doesn't matter which one you plug it into. I'm going to plug it into the second one. Negative 8x plus 5y equals negative 28. But it doesn't matter which one you plug it into. So I have 8x plus 5 times y, which is 5 times 4, equals negative 28. So negative 8x plus 20 equals negative 28 minus 20. So negative 8x equals negative 48. Divide by negative 8. X equals positive 6. So write the word solution. X is 6, y is 4. And of course, remember, you guys know how to verify the solution. Let's go on to number 8. Okay, so number 8 here. So it looks like what I'm going to do is just multiply the bottom one by 2, negative 2, to make this negative 10x. So multiply the bottom one by negative 2. So I'm going to keep the top equation the same. So it's 10x plus 3y equals negative 25. Multiply the bottom one all the way through by negative 2. So it'll be negative 10x minus 20y equals negative 60. Add them together, the x's cancel. 3y minus 20y is negative 17y. And negative 25 minus 60 is negative 85. Divide both sides by 17. Negative 17, sorry. Negative 85 divided by 17, y is equal to positive 5. All right, now we have to find x, right, when y is equal to 5. So I'm going to plug it into the bottom one here. 5x plus 10y equals 30. So we have 5x plus 10 times 5, because that's my y, equals 30. 5x plus 50 equals 30, minus 50 from both sides. 5x equals negative 20. 30 minus 50 is negative 20. Divide by 5. X equals, watch the signs, negative 4. Solution. X is negative 4. Y is 5. Okay, next. Sorry, this is really dark down here. I didn't realize that. It is to solve the radical equations here. Always remember to check. That's part of the process. You have to check because you could have answers that don't actually work. All right, so the first thing you always do, actually I'm going to do 10 first because 10 looks a little bit easier. All right, so I'm going to start with 10 first. So you always isolate first. Get the radical by itself. So I see this negative of 5 in front. All right, and this is times in here, so we have to divide by negative 5. So I have the square root of p plus 1 equals positive 5. Now, to get rid of a square root, you square both sides. And a square and a square root will cancel each other out. So I'm left with p plus 1 equals 25. And then just solve this. Minus 1, p equals 24. Now, you do have to check this. All right, remember, we always plug into the original. So I'm writing down the original. Okay, now I'm going to plug in 24. So it's negative 5, the square root of 24 plus 1. I wrote 25 because I was thinking what 24 plus 1 is. 24 plus 1, does that equal negative 25? So it's negative 5, the square root of 25, does that equal negative 25? Well, the square root of 25 is 5, so it's negative 5. Remember, this is all times in here. Times 5. Yes, negative 25 equals negative 25, so this checks. All right, so let's go back to 9 because 9 is a little bit more complicated. All right, so First off, what I'm going to actually do is just rewrite this because I can hardly see it. So it looks like it's 3 plus the square root of 6n minus 26 equals n. Okay, so again, we're going to isolate. So I have to minus 3 from both sides. So I get the square root of 6n minus 26 equals n minus 3. Remember, we can't actually add them. They're not like terms. All right, so square both sides. So they cross each other out. So now I have 6n minus 26 equals n minus 3 squared is n minus 3 times n minus 3. So now we're going to double distribute. So we, on the right side here, so we have n times n is n squared. N times negative 3 is negative 3n. Negative 3 times n is negative 3n. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. So it is a quadratic. Let's clean up the right side and then we'll move everything over. So we have n squared. Negative 3n minus 3n is negative 6n plus 9. All right, it has to equal 0 in order to solve this. So minus 6n, add 26. Minus 6n, add 26. Okay, so I have 0 equals n squared minus 12n plus 35. All right, so now I'm going to factor. I'm going to use master product. So we get positive 35n squared. What multiplies to 35 adds to 12? That would be 7n and 5n. They have to be the same signs. That's the only way to get a positive 35. And to get a negative 12, they both have to be negative. Bring down the ends. Make sure it's equal to 0. Factor by grouping. So the GCF is n, so we have n minus 7. GCF is negative 5 times n minus 7. So my factors are n minus 5 and n minus 7. Make sure you still have equal to 0. T-chart. We have n minus 7 equals 0, n minus 5 equals 0. Add 5, n equals 5. Add 7, n equals 7. All right, now you have to check. Remember, we check original all the time. So remember, my original is 3 plus the square root of 6n minus 26 equals n. Okay, so we're going to, let me write that on both sides. All right, so try and 5. 3 plus the square root. So what the heck happened there? 3 plus the square root. 6 times 5 minus 26, does that equal 5? Because it says, does it equal n? So it's 3 plus, so that's 30 minus 26 equals 5. 30 minus 26 is 4, so it's the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2, so it's 3 plus 2 equals 5. 5 equals 5, and that checks. All right, now we have to try 7. So we have 3 plus the square root of 6 times 7 minus 26. Does that equal 7? 3 plus the square root of 42 minus 26. Does that equal 7? So it's 3 plus the square root of 16. The square root of 16 is 4. And 7 equals 7, so that checks. Okay, so let's look at the last page. Okay, so number 11 and 12 is to find the inverse. Remember, inverse means to switch x and y. All right, so first write it as y equals 5x minus 10. Switch x and y, so it's x equals 5y minus 10. And then just solve for y. Add 10. Remember, you can't add x and 10, so it's x plus 10 equals 5y. You have to get rid of the 5 in front of the y. That's times, so divide by 5. So it's x plus 10 over 5 equals y. All right, so let's take and remember, right, as using inverse function notation, this inverse of f of x equals x plus 10 over 5. All right, so let's take a look at number 12. Again, we're going to switch x and y. First, write it as y equals negative 4 minus 5 over 4x. Switch x and y. X equals negative 4 minus 5 over 4y. Add 4. So we have x plus 4 equals negative 5 over 4y. Remember, the right way to get rid of a fraction is to multiply by its reciprocal. So it's negative 4 over 5. Both sides, so you have to distribute here. Distribute, so it's negative 4 over 5. X minus 16 over 5. And that equals y. And this could be written like this if you want to put the fractions together. Since they do have the same denominator, it would be negative 4x minus 16 all over 5. So it would be the inverse of f of x. Remember, it's at negative 1. Negative 4x minus 16 all over 5. Okay, so let's take a look at number 13. All right, so it says to solve using the quadratic formula. So I'm going to write down the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I'll give you this formula. You don't have to memorize this formula. All right, so the first thing you have to do for number 12, it has to be equal to 0, so you have to add 6b. So it's 2b squared plus 6b minus 12 equals 0. Identify a, b, and c. So a is 2, b is 6, c is negative 12. All right, so now we're going to plug it into the formula. So we have x equals negative whatever b is, so it's negative 6, plus minus the square root of 6 squared. Notice I'm using parentheses. Minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is, that should actually be negative 12. I wrote 12. It's actually negative 12. All over 2 times 2. All right, so we get x equals negative 6 plus minus. Now, you're going to plug in what's only under the radical. You're not plugging in the radical. See, I wrote the radical. So plug in what's under the square root. So it's 6 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 12. And then you put that underneath the radical. Times negative 12. And I got 132 over 4. Now we want to simplify the square root of 132. See if there's a perfect square that divides into 132. So if you have to, you can plug in your calculator, go into y equals and do 132 divided by x. And see if there's a number. And there is. It's 4. 4 and 3. 33, sorry. So it's 2 to the square root of 33. So it's x equals negative 6 plus minus 2 to the square root of 33 over 4. All right, now you're going to separate it. So we can reduce negative 6 over 4 plus minus 2 square root of 33 over 4. All right, so negative 6 over 4 reduces to negative 3 over 2 plus minus. And 2 over 4 reduces to 1 and 2. So be square root of 33 over 2. So it's negative 3 over 2 plus minus the square root of 33 over 2. All right, number 14. So it looks like I actually should have given you guys more room, huh? All right, number 14. So we have, sorry, erase the quadratic formula. Let me write it quick. All right, so again, it's not in the right form, so we have to get it to equal 0. So minus 7m minus 17. So it's 7m squared minus 7m minus 17 equals 0. A is 7, B is negative 7, C is negative 17. All right, so plugging it in. So we have x equals negative, and B is negative 7. Plus minus the square root of negative 7 squared. Minus 4 times A, which is 7, times C, which is negative 17, all over 2 times 7. So x equals the negative 7 here becomes 7. Plug in only what's underneath the square root. So it's, make sure you use parentheses. It's negative 7 squared minus 4 times 7 times negative 17. And I got 525 over 14. So I know definitely 525 is divisible by 25, and that's a perfect square. Right, so I'm just going to put this over here. 525. So it's the square root of 25 times the square root of 21, which is 5, the square root of 21. All right, so I have x equals 7 plus minus 5, the square root of 21 over 14. Let's see if we can simplify, but it doesn't look like it. Oh, yeah, actually we can. We have 7 over 14 plus minus 5, the square root of 21 over 14. And 7 over 14, right here, sorry, this reduces to 1/2. So x equals 1 over 2 plus minus 5, the square root of 21 over 14. So that would be my final answer. All right, let's take a look at number 15. So we're simplifying the square roots. Remember, in order for it to be a perfect square, it has to have an even exponent, like x squared, x to the 4th, x to the 6th. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of x to the 4th is x squared. The square root of x to the 6th is x to the 3rd. Remember, just do half the exponent. All right, start with 50. What perfect square goes into 50? Well, that's 25 and 2. And then we have an x to the 3rd. So go down 1, x squared will go in there, times x. And y to the 4th is a perfect square because it has an even exponent. The square root of 25 is 5. The square root of x squared is x. And the square root of y to the 4th is y squared. And then I have 2x underneath the radical. Okay, number 16. Same thing. What perfect square goes into 200? That would be 100 times 2. Then I have an x to the 6th. Well, that's an even exponent, so that is a perfect square. So x to the 6th goes on the left. And y to the 3rd, that would be y squared and y. The square root of 100 is 10. The square root of x to the 6th is x to the 3rd. Remember, it's half the exponent. And the square root of y squared is y. And then we have the square root of 2y. All right, and the last one, which is, I'm going to rewrite it because I can't see it. So it looks like it's y equals x squared plus 3x minus 5. And y minus, looks like a 3. I have to look on my paper here. Minus 3 equals x. All right, so we're solving the system of equations. So what I want you to do is put the linear, which is the bottom one. This is the quadratic, the top, and this is your linear. Put that in y equals form, so add 3. Y equals x plus 3. Now they're both y equal, so you set them equal to each other. X squared plus 3x minus 5 equals x plus 3. All right, it is a quadratic. How do we know? Because it has an x squared, so minus x and minus 3. So we get x squared. 3x minus x is 2x. Negative 5 minus 3 is 8. Negative 8 equals 0. Okay, so now I'm going to factor. I'm going to use master product. So I multiply the first times the last, and I get negative 8x. What multiplies to 8 minuses to a 2, so that's 4 and 2. When you multiply 4 times 2, you have to get -8, so they have to be different signs. But when you add them, it has to give you +2. So it has to be +4 and -2 here. Bring down the ends. 4 terms. You're going to factor by grouping. It's what we do when we have 4 terms. Don't forget. In the blue group, the GCF is x, so it's x times x plus 4. In the red group, I noticed there's a negative, so it's -2 times x plus 4, and that equals 0. All right, write your factors. So my factors are x minus 2 and x plus 4 equals 0. T-chart. X minus 2 equals 0, x plus 4 equals 0, and solve for x. X equals 2. All right, now we're not done because all we did was get x. Now you have to get the y values. Okay, so now we have to find the y value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug it into that linear, which is y equals x plus 3 from the beginning. Oh, what happened to my... Sorry, I moved this. All right, so I'm going to plug it in to find y now. So find y. Remember, I'm going to plug it in to my linear equation, which is y equals x plus 3, both sides. All right, so let's start with 2. Y equals 2 plus 3. Y equals 5. Y equals x is -4 plus 3. Y equals -1. Write the word solution. So one of them, make sure you match them up correctly. When x is 2, y is 5. So it's 2 comma 5. When x is -4, y is -1. So it's -4, -1. Okay, so that's it. And obviously, if you know, you guys should know how to check. All right, so that's it. And make sure you study. Everybody have a good night. See you tomorrow.